You can see the Meet Echo and the slides. But then I recommend you to try to hide all the menus.
I can share the full screen because
Okay.
I don't catch all the techniques to hide the possible frames.
So in English, there should be an upper menu which is called View or something like that, and then you usually can select which kind of bars you want to see or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, one of those. Maybe unselect the two that you have selected.
Okay.
Yes, and now unselect the other one as well. This one you just like newly opened basically. I think the menu where you have been, I'm just guessing because I can't read anything. The menu where you have been,
Okay.
there was another one ticked. So if you untick that one, the lower one, F9, I guess. Maybe that one. I don't know.
It's the language issue. Okay, so I
Yeah.
can show the screen. Okay, yeah, full screen is better for
Oh,
this.
you can maybe just like actually probably can take the sidebar and you just like uh,
Mm,
take the line and just move it to the left. No?
mm.
Hmm. Just guessing.
So.
Okay, I don't know. I can't help you here.
Okay,
Okay, but I guess we should actually start very soon.
yeah, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Hello, everyone. So thanks very much for your joining this the IAB open meeting. So these are the Mira and the Zhenbin. Okay, Mira is always take the chair as the IB chair. So that's the another co-chair is alternate the IB members. Okay. So this is IETF note well. So this is a reminder of the IETF policies. So that's you are maybe familiar with this the IETF note well. I hope that you can go through this the note well very quickly and to understand the IETF policies. Okay. Okay. Next, we have a small introduction about this the IB open meeting. So that's in fact this is the third IB open meeting. So this meeting is IB organized session focus on the technical and architectural topics. So this objective is to increase the visibility of the IB work and also to collect feedback and community input about ongoing and the new IB work. So besides this, the IB open meeting, we have the several this the mailing list. So including this the architecture discussion mailing list for the architectural discussion and the IB documents. And IB at ib.org for comments and concerns directly to the IB. And we also have this the program mailing list for direct comments on work of a specific program. So this is the IB open meeting and the corresponding mailing list for the specific IB work. So this is the agenda for this IB open meeting. So this including the topic, first is the welcome and the status updates. Then this is the Tommy will introduce the EDM program. So then this is the open microphone. So this is the agenda. Do you have any this the my idea to batch the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would like to add something. So if you look at the meeting material, there's an additional presentation there where where Yari actually summarized nicely some of the previous discussions around centralization and previous work that happened around centralization. So that is something that he curated based on the discussion we had yesterday in the plenary. So after Tommy's talk, we will take his slides, go quickly through that, and then start a discussion there.
Okay, so we will add the topic about the centralization from the Yari. Okay. Any other idea for the batch agenda? Okay, so then we'll go to the next. Okay, Mira, that's your turn to introduce the updates of the IB documents and the programs. Okay, Mira.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as usually, we try to update you a little bit on the technical work we're doing. So since the last meeting, we published one RFC. This one has been around for a while, but it's finally published and has an RFC number, and that's a report for the data workshop. But the more interesting news is that we also have now a draft for the COVID-19 workshop, which is a workshop that happened last November. So that's kind of reasonably new, but it's already in very good shape. We got a bunch of review comments already. It's a research, it's a workshop report, which means like, I hope there's not like a huge amount of discussion about what needs to be in the document. It's really trying just to report what's happening. I have the feeling that this is kind of ready, so we will soon decide to go for a final community feedback on this draft, and then hopefully publish it very soon as RC. So if you haven't read this yet and you want to read it, it's a good time now, but we will also send out an official community call. That's only workshop reports this time, but we might come up with new documents soon. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, then program updates. Last time in the IAB open meeting, we reported a little bit that we looked at our programs, and we also considered the structure of the programs a little bit, and we discovered that we have like two different kind of programs. One set of programs is really focusing on technical work where we want to engage with the community more, and then there's another set of program which is usually a small focus groups of experts that help the IAB to do their work, to work on their responsibilities. So that's why we introduced this restructuring of programs. And since then, we've been working on also reviewing all the programs. We have to make sure they are fit for purpose, basically. They serve and support the IAB in the way they're supposed to be. What we did is we looked at two of the programs which are more in the group of admin support groups. So not technical programs, but I still want to quickly mention this here because that has been recent work, even so it's like not really bringing the technical and architecture discussion forward. So we have the IANA program, which will now become the IETF IANA group. So the charter of this program will be updated, and what we do is we align a little bit the activities and the communication we had with IANA into this program, matching up with reality, basically. You might have seen that there was already a mail on this sent out to the architecture discuss list, so you had a chance to comment there. You can still comment, but basically this is ready, and the IAB is ready to go ahead and make this change. The other support group or previous program is the liaison oversight program, and the IAB decided to close this program. And first of all, we would like to thank all program members for their service. This program has been dormant for many years. There was really no activity, and that's because this program wasn't, like, even so the name seems to suggest that, wasn't involved in the actual oversight of the liaison management. The program was very active in defining how liaison management works and defining processes and providing advice. But the kind of day-to-day oversight work was like taken up by the IAB directly for a long time. And we are currently working on also improving this liaison management. And that's what you will see on the next slide. So this is what the IAB is currently doing. We're in the process of looking at our liaison management and try to improve it. This is because we think it's a really important role in the IAB. And we want to make sure it's more clear because there have been a lot of confusions, you know, who to contact if you have a question, like when to send a liaison statement, when to have a liaison relationship, and so on. So we really want to make this process more clear and more transparent, and also improve the internal communication and the view that the IAB has, because sometimes it wasn't actually easy to find out for the IAB itself, you know, where activities are needed or not needed. Another point here is that we also noticed that we are at the point where we actually have to work on knowledge transfer. It is happening that people do retire, and we have to make sure that we transfer this knowledge and that we keep continuity of this knowledge for a bunch of experts in different regions of the IETF. And it's not enough to just, like, you know, have their email address, put them on a mailing list or whatever, because those people might actually go away at some point. So we have to be more active here. So one thing that the IAB already did in this respect was we created a new position within the IAB, which we call the liaison coordinator position. So this position has the goal to be really one clear contact point for the liaison managers as well as for the community. And therefore, we have established an email alias that you can use to send us questions about liaisons or liaison statement. Of course, you can still contact the liaison managers. You can still contact the IAB directly. But also, this email alias is really for any liaison-related question, a good first contact point if you don't know who to ask otherwise. So this new position basically replaces the current shepherd structure that we have. The current structure was a one-to-one structure where we had like one IAB shepherd for each liaison manager. The liaison managers are stable positions because that's where the knowledge is about the other SDO, about like how to interact with them. But then we had like a second person on the IAB who would be like the shepherd and the contact point. And that was just like confusing because we would change them on a yearly basis, and it was like many different people, it was hard to find and so on. So like concentrating this on like one position, which probably will be filled by two people to have a backup, should like make things more clear and easier, hopefully. But we're also still in the process to define this position a little bit more, to figure out if there are further tasks that these people that fill the position can take on, and we will provide you further information, hopefully very soon by email. But that's only really just the first step. There's more what we want to do, and because this is an important topic, and we also want to involve community experts and liaison managers to get feedback from them to understand what needs to be done, where improvements are needed. And I'm bringing this up here as part of the IAB open meeting, even so this is not on the technical side, it's really more internal admin trivia. But still, I think this is a good opportunity to get you all the information as a community that you need, especially that we now have this new role, but also to have a discussion and have a forum for that. And with that, I will make a pause. I wasn't able to read the whole chat, but I will review it at some point, but I will give the people a community to enter the queue and comment if they want.
So if you don't mind, Miria and Robin, this is nice change. Is it public somewhere beside this slide?
It's in the IAB report. Again, about the liaison coordinator, I will also provide more detailed information soon. And we are about to update the webpage. I thought we already did, but maybe we didn't. So it's like, it's all fresh news, and it will all happen very soon.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say that that I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. The situation last several years in which there was so much silence that if liaison managers needed help they couldn't figure out how to go to was was definitely a bad situation for all concerned. And I really appreciate that the IAB is taking this seriously again and moving in some direction, which is will keep both the liaison managers and the IAB a little bit more informed about what each other are doing and coordinated. So thank you.
Definitely, that's the goal here. I got a bunch of emails over the last year where people just didn't know who to ask. But it's also that, like, we at the IAB want to have a better view about what's happening. And to answer Martin's question from the chat, so this is not an email list, this is an alias that's really just forwarded to the person who are serving in this position. And the person who's serving in this position is usually the one who can hopefully, like, some of the easy questions, just answer them directly if it's more about, you know, process. But in other cases, it's also just like part of the role to just forward those questions to the right people, hopefully. So if it's for you, it will be forwarded to you if you're a liaison manager. But we also want to add a function to the data tracker that we can actually reach easily all the liaison managers and create a list for that, because that also doesn't exist right now. So many small things that we are looking at the moment. Wait, sorry, I'm not looking at the queue. So Charles, you're also in the queue.
Yeah, hi. One of the things I've been spending a lot of time on, and especially recently, is open source and its relation to standards. And there's a really nice ongoing set of sessions that Open Forum Europe's putting on, and Alyssa spoke there. I also work closely with the Linux Foundation. And I think they're talking today. I think in general we need, I don't know if a liaison's the right thing, but it doesn't look like we have any liaison with Linux Foundation or with other open source organizations. And it's interesting. I think it's a bit of a problematic. When I've looked into it before, what's come back is, well, we don't have a problem with open source organizations, and the liaisons usually like, when we're dealing with problems. But it just seems like a liaison's handy thing, so that we pop up on their slides even as an organization that they're working with, and that we have a little bit more communication as these worlds of open source and standards continue to have more and more impact on each other, I'd say.
Yeah, so this is 2 points here. One is, can you mute because there is echo? Thanks. So one point is that, like, those cases where we kind of had to establish a liaison relationship, it's often because the other organization requires us to have like this kind of formal relationship to, get into the meetings, access their documents or whatever. And that's the case where we really need a formal liaison. In other cases, it's sufficient if or it's usually like just having the formal liaison doesn't help that actually anything would change. So it really is the people that have to go there and work together and talk to each other, right? And that doesn't require a formal liaison. But the other point really is here also to figure out where we need to go and who we need to talk to and so on. And I see that actually independent of like the strict liaison management itself, it's really about outreach. It's really about figuring out what other SDOs and organizations are doing, make sure we are well aligned with them. And that's definitely a big field where we need to do more work. And I have this on my list of to-dos, but I put this a little bit in a different bucket. And it's definitely something I want to drive forward and discuss, but it's also less straightforward because it's sometimes people go to other organizations and they give a presentation at a conference and whatever, and that's always very positive. But like, we don't have a task force, we don't have like a way to send people somewhere. It's really kind of on, like, if they are there, if they have the possibility, they can do it. But even for those occasions, I think we need better coordination and have a better visibility what's happening and who's going where and telling what. So yeah, I think that's more discussion is needed.
Did that, Miriam?
Thanks. And sort of your take on it is how I feel too. It's like, the people who are involved, everything's going well. There's not a problem there. We're able to work with open source organizations very well. It's just sort of from an optics point of view, it almost looks like we're not, because we don't have that liaison. And so I think, and for some people who are looking to get more involved in this or don't know what's already going on, I think it'd be very helpful as well. So
Okay, that's a really good point. So maybe we should figure out how to make this more visible on our webpage and wherever. Yep.
If I can add to that really quickly, I think there's a lot of the important thing to take into account is that all technical discussions and stuff should happen as regardless of whether there's a liaisonship and regardless of anything else, right? There's nothing stopping IETF participants to engage in multiple other communities. The IAB would definitely like to hear of places where that's not working, right? Where is a more formal relationship, as Maria suggested, is actually necessary, or where do we actually need to send sort of more official correspondence? And I think we would love feedback for what is working and what is not working, so that we can figure out how to better update the liaison management roles in the first place, and which ones are working well and which ones are not. But don't let any of this program stop people from working in multiple organizations and bringing work both directions and correspondence both directions.
And I mean, this is still not like a structural approach, but like if you have information that you think is like about another SDO or about another organization that you think is important, like please send an email to the IB. We are always open for that, and we're always able or like keen to learn something. So I think we have more people on the queue. Bob.
Last year, I got involved with ANSI on unmanned aircraft systems standards works. They're collecting who's doing what. And I basically had to represent the IETF and what we are doing in our standards, which impact UAS. I did reach out to try to get any liaison or other official context. I got only minimal support on that. I think the final document coming out of ANSI was reasonably well in including IETF as an SDO involved in unmanned aircraft systems. ANSI then spooled up an effort on satellite communication. And I just did not have the bandwidth or anything else to reach out to people to say, hey, ANSI's doing this satellite thing, and they've just published that document, and IETF is really not mentioned at all in terms of satellite communications. So just kind of saying that my experience has been a little bit on the struggle side, particularly now I'm dealing more and more in more, shall we say, closed SDOs, like in aviation, ICAO, and working with ASTM, where they have some very formal rules for liaisoning. And it's I'm just participating there as a technical expert, but it's having more IETF backing may be of real value, particularly if you see what's I've managed to get into the private network proposal for aviation they call GRAIN, and some of the they do have an ICAO does have a liaison with ICANN, but that's different in intent. So I'm just kind of sharing with you that there is a other areas that maybe we do better, and I don't know if it should be I should be doing more or how to proceed on this.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the point when you say you would appreciate more backing from the IETF, but on the other hand, it wouldn't change the situation that we still need somebody like you who actually participates in these organizations and goes there and has the time and the bandwidth to actually contribute where needed. And that's not necessarily always the requirement we have for all the liaison managers. It's really more like kind of conflict handling when it comes up, right? So that's a much stronger commitment. May I ask you, like, who did you reach out to when you did this last year?
I'll have to look at the emails and see. It may have been Elisa when I was doing with the ANSI standards work. We did get a more or less an official wording of that I pulled together for what the IETF is as an SDO, which they wanted, officially, how do you define yourself as an SDO? And I what did get pulled some wording together to do that. And I'll forward you what I have on that so you can see it.
That would be great, thanks. And then we have Bron, I think.
Okay, because of the reason of the time, I think we have to cut the line. I think the Simon is the last one. Okay.
Cool, thanks. I was just going to say I've kind of wound up in an unofficial liaison position in a couple of places. I've been invited as a technical expert to TC39's date time work that we talked about in dispatch earlier this week, and also at the CalConnect side, I'm kind of unofficially at least the liaison to IETF because I'm a chair on the calendaring group over here as well. Is this something that I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of other people who are in similar positions. Does this need to be officially tracked, or do we care if there's kind of unofficial liaison stuff happening as well?
So there's no requirement to track that. I think it's again generally a good thing if people keep an eye out and promote IETF work in other organizations. I mean, like you're also not making any official statements for the IETF in your position, right? Like if you're contributing on a technical matter and you say, hey guys, watch out, there's some work in the IETF that you should be aware of, that's always a good thing. If you need some backing, if you want some support, if you have a problem, that's really the point where you're very welcome to reach out to the IAB, or in general, like we are always interested to learn what's going on, right? And as I said, like we don't have a good track record yet, so it would be helpful to learn more, but we also don't really know how to organize that in an efficient way at this point.
All right, sounds good. I will write something up at some point. Not right now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Martin, let me just reply to that one quickly. Martin mentioned that people might misrepresent work of the IETF. So that happens as well, but like that will always happen. That's something we don't have a control of. But it's, as I said, like I think there's in very few cases the need to talk as the IETF. It's some SDOs required to have like this official representations, but in a lot of cases, I hope that we can actually work together and do good technical work by concentrating on the technical matters, and that's what we all want. Yeah, Simon.
Thank you. I'm Simon Hicks. I would note that I'm from Vice Chair of the ETSI board, so I'm making an observation from that perspective. Although I'm not speaking officially on behalf of ETSI, I'm actually from a UK government employee. It works quite awkwardly in the reverse direction as well. When as ETSI we want to talk to IETF, it's very difficult to work out who to talk to unless we happen to have individuals who are taking part in particular from IETF from groups within the room. And I think that's where something like ETSI with quite a strong central secretariat struggles against something like IETF with quite a small secretariat. So I don't really see any answer to the problem apart from sort of, could we strengthen the secretariat in some way to do this, which I appreciate is a cost issue, etc., and is therefore not easy. But I think sort of IETF would benefit in the overall SDO ecosystem if there was some sort of central contact point that could do some of this interfacing. And again, I appreciate that's not a role that the Secretariat in IETF currently takes. It's very much more of an organisational thing. But I think, you know, as we get a more integrated global system, you know, and something like 6G demands that standards interface all over the place in ways in which they haven't done before, you know, we're going to need more SDO contact. And, you know, if we can't get the SDO ecosystem talking to each other better and understanding each other better, then we are going to become more and more awkward, and from which I think will just fragment the overall SDO system even more badly than arguably it is at the moment. You know, and sort of how do we do standards, etc., etc. Thanks.
So the official point here, contact point here, is the IAB, and I hope having a separate email alias here that is like more clear to that helps a little bit. And we will put the information on the website in the right places, hopefully. Even so, the website might also not be super clear and easy to find. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just like a missing information to other SDOs, like that the IAB is the right point to talk to. But to be honest, if you use any of the other email addresses that you find on our website, most of them go to the Secretariat and they know how to forward this to the IAB. So it shouldn't be that hard to reach us. It's probably just like unclear how to do it.
Okay.
Do you think this like Simon is already gone, right? Do you think this like email address will help, or is there more kind of advertisement needed?
I would suggest an email address does help, but it's actually being able to engage in a two-way conversation with a person who understands your system and can be a central contact point of the system, and in a way in which SDOs with a larger secretariat can and do. You know, and I appreciate they're probably rather more formal than we are in IETF. You know, but I think, you know, as we get this greater level of interfacing that I think we need in technology as a whole, you know, I think all SDOs have to move with the times, and then we see more and more sort of central coordination in IETF as the years have gone by, and I think as we move forward, we need a greater degree of central coordination here, in the sense of people you can actually engage in a conversation with, rather than just a mailbox you can send an email to.
Okay, understood. I think it's yeah, probably a slightly separate problem, because we do have, for example, leadership meetings with other SDOs like IEEE and so on. So that's probably more in this category, but it's good input. Thank you.
Okay, so next topic is EDM for the latest progress from the Tommy. Okay, let's share this. Okay. Okay.
All right. Slides up.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. I'll be giving a quick update on one of our technical programs, which is one of the newer ones we have. This is the program that's on talking about evolvability of protocols, deployability, and maintainability. And in a lot of ways, it's carrying on work that the IAB had done in the past, but trying to build on that and find ways that we can come to more technical recommendations to the IETF for how we ensure that the protocols we're developing have good properties around these aspects. And one administrative change here is that David Skenazy is now going to be a co-lead of this program, so hopefully that will allow us to have still better output and more energy in this. So David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm David Skenazy, and I'm very excited to be working on electronic dance music here with the IAB. Back to you, Tommy.
I love it. All right, next slide, please. So just some details here. We do have a GitHub where you can see some of the issues we're thinking about. It's at that link. And the document that we're currently talking most about is actually one that existed prior to this program being created, but we think is a very important work item that we want to progress, that Martin Thompson began. It's the draft Use It or Lose It. And we've met now twice. We had our last call in December, and we're going to plan a new call for sometime in April. Right now, so far, we've gone on a cadence of, roughly as often as the IETF meetings, but just slightly delayed. Next slide, please. So at the last meeting, one of the major topics we covered was just looking at what are the mechanisms that we're doing for protocol extensions, and are there things that we could add as notes to the Use It or Lose It draft. And one of the topics here was looking at the relative success and how ossified we see things when we're using something that's like a proper version negotiation versus just extending a protocol. One of the observations in the document is that you want to be able to use an extension point often, and that is the best way to ensure it does not ossify. But version negotiation specifically is something that can get used very infrequently, and especially is not being used when you first deploy a new protocol. And so we were noting that actually some of the most successful cases of this is when a protocol has this version negotiation in some other protocol's extension point. For example, HTTP using the ALPN, which is just a TLS extension, which is a very well greased and well understood extension point. We also discussed some anti-patterns, like how we see that the IP itself has a version field that really is often not used, and you need to have some encapsulating protocol like the ether type actually determine what is the protocol version. So we have a lot of redundant version indicators in that case. So we have some initial text that was added to the document based on this, but we're going to continue to refine that and go further. Next slide, please. And there's also areas that we noted that we are still learning about. There are ongoing, essentially, experiments, particularly in what Quick is doing and the experience we're having in TLS and HTTP. Quick is one of the kind of first protocols like this that's really defining a strong notion of invariance that will last across multiple versions going into the future. We haven't deployed those other versions yet, so we're going to have to see how that works out. Greasing is also something that's done a lot already in TLS. It's something that we can do in Quick, and we're talking about doing more in HTTP. And this is an area, again, where we'd like to have advice on this, but we're also still gathering information. And particularly one of the interesting areas for greasing is talking about how we can coordinate this. A lot of the discussion we had indicates that really the strength that we have from trying to exercise code points is not just in doing random things through completely random greasing, but really coordinating an effort between different implementations. So that's something that we want to further explore in our next meeting. So if these are interesting topics to you, please join in. Anyone can join the list and anyone can join the meetings. Next slide. I think, is that, yep. So here's the mailing list you can join. We'll be scheduling a call very soon, and you can send your thoughts through email or GitHub. Elliot. You are muted.
Right, permissions problem corrected. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. Just one quick comment, which is I think there's a difference, in a qualitative difference between protocols and formats. And so when you look at each, right, a protocol you can negotiate, you can fail fast. There are all sorts of things you can do in a protocol. With an object format, you have less opportunity to fail. And so you have to look at the problem a little differently, which is to say, how do you handle backward compatibility? And this has, I think, plagued some of the systems that we use pretty regularly, like email and other things, where you really don't want to have a backward compatibility, but then you've got that one person who's using, a teletype from, or something they bought because they can't see. They bought it 10, 15 years ago, and they're not going to replace it. So there are some aspects around those formats, and as you're going through this exercise, it might be worth just teasing out those differences.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and I will add a note for that on our list of issues to look at. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I will cede the floor. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I guess we have Stuart.
Just a data point, really. You said IP versions weren't used. Actually, we use IP versions to identify whether a packet is or isn't an IP packet in the MPLS domain, and then actually sequester those fields for some other internal notations. So it's not actually correct to pick that particular example.
Yeah, thank you for that note. And I think the way I was explaining it was overly simplified, and the text we're working on in the document should be hopefully a bit more nuanced, of just pointing out that there are instances where that version field could not be fully leveraged, not that it is never leveraged.
Okay, you just picked that one, and it just happens to be used in another protocol that was one of my favorites.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we move on with picking up the centralization discussion from yesterday, basically.
Thank you. Can you share the slides?
Okay.
There we go. Excellent. So this is basically just, as noted, continuing the discussion from yesterday, and a little bit of context setting and pointers to existing work, and a couple of thoughts about way forward or how this can be best discussed. You go to the next slide, please. So the topics that I think we are discussing about is two things really. One is what we call centralized service deployment, which is about basically providing services by a single entity rather than doing it in a collaborative fashion. And when I say single entity, I don't mean that you have one server. You could be running a distributed worldwide network, but it's still under the control of a single administrative domain, single company, for instance. And of course, the internet is not either or. There's a mixture of things inside the internet, and some services are naturally under single control, like my website or alternative DNS server. It's their information, only one place can really provide it. Other services could be such that they are fundamentally collaborative. I think packet forwarding might be one example here. So you have to forward to others essentially. And then there's some service that could be either way. So that's sort of a technical thing in some sense, that we are within one domain or one administrative entity. And then there's internet consolidation, which is more about like competition and companies and so forth, and how many service providers we have for particular things in the world, and how much choice do you have as a consumer. And I think the IAB heard yesterday has also heard before a clear message from you all, the community, that these topics are important, centralization is important, and we should also acknowledge that we realize that this is a complex topic. We realize that it has many parts that are not technical, and that there are difficult trade-offs, and there's various viewpoints. Next slide, please. The question is, does it actually matter, and should we be discussing it? And I at least personally think it matters. I think other people were also saying that. It can have many impacts, and sort of important to realize that there can be in many directions. So first of all, some of this can be good. I think we've seen some technology adoption stories, even with recent IETF technologies, where the dominance or the ease of large entities to switch on new technology has actually improved things quite a lot. It's particularly easy if you control multiple parties in a protocol exchange. It's also useful sometimes to hide in a crowd. But there are also serious drawbacks. One is, of course, resilience, like if that one big service goes down, and we've seen this kind of thing happen occasionally, then we are in a world of hurt. I think the right architectural response is to have not huge entities, but more smaller entities collaborating. It's also issues with interoperability, ability of new entrants to enter, and so forth. One sort of a personally concerning issue is also that if you have two large entities that have a lot of data, let's say, just pick a random example, entities that would know the browsing histories of people for a large number of people, that's very attractive target. Even if you are, well-meaning, you want to do like all of us, I think in the IETF, everybody who's involved is doing this, or any of these services with very good intentions, but they are also affected by governments and shareholders and so on that might be asking for access to the data, for instance. So I think we want to avoid that in some ways. There's of course economics involved. I won't go into details of that. You can read some of that when we move to the next slide. So I was trying to collect a little bit of previously published material about this, and of course, at least for me, it's surprising how good stuff you can find from the old RFCs. They were really written cleverly. RFC 1958, for instance, talks about competitive multi-vendor, multi-provider public networks. 3935 talks about decentralized control, its user empowerment, and so forth. Next slide, please. I had a few other things here. I won't go into the details of these things to save time for a discussion, but I just wanted to point to the Internet Society's global report on consolidation and the Journal of Cyber Policy. And if you click one more slide forward, so they actually published a special issue that was sponsored by Isaac. I don't see the next slide yet, but can you move to the next slide? Oh, there we go. So they published an issue with consolidation-related articles about various kinds of research or thoughts around this topic. Worth reading to take a look. And maybe that's enough for this past work. The point was just to say that there's quite a lot of that's already been written about it. If you go to the last slide, where I had a few thoughts about how to move forward. And I see many possibilities for failing to discuss this properly. One is that I think we need to take it to heart that this is not just important, but also this complex topic that you can't have like one-sided view into it. The other thing that we want to avoid is that we shouldn't take the debate to the extremes, that just because we can't have like fully peer-to-peer network with Bitcoin exchanged all over the place doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. And the same is true of also like not everything's going to be centralized. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about each case that we come across carefully and think about whether we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Third point is that we should actually understand this space, and sometimes you get this frustration like I get it that well I can't really do much, so what should I stop? But I think it's actually useful to understand understand the issues, understand the impacts, collect measurement data, take actual stock of what's happening out there. And this information can be helpful for us, but it's also obviously helpful for the rest of the society, who's also, I think, interested in some of the conclusions. And finally, I do think there are helpful things that we can do. And if the goal is to have like this magic solution that will solve all of these problems, then I don't think we should be holding our breath. But I think there are things we could do. One example is that if you have something where you're only using one instance of something, some technology, for instance, and that's too centralized or consolidated for people's taste, then having a way to discover other places that offer the same service can actually be useful. I think we've done this in the DNS space, or are doing it at least. So I think that's a helpful technique or example of a helpful technique. And I think that's it from my side. I don't know if the other people from IAB have been thinking about it, want to provide their thoughts, or anybody else for that matter in the working group. Speak up.
Yeah, I would like to add one point that Tommy made yesterday, and probably he's much better in making his point himself. But I think it's also that like we can not necessarily push somebody to adopt a certain technique just because we think it's better for the internet. I think deployment is always driven by what's the benefits that a solution provides, what's the cheapest solution, what's the more easier to deploy solution, and so on. So with that, we probably have to keep in mind this when we design our protocols, and also make sure that those solutions that we design and that we favor are the ones that can be easily adopted. But I think Tommy made this point somehow much better. Or maybe I'm misinterpreting him, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. I think you're next.
That I'm still having some permissions issues. Hey, thanks, Yari. This is good work, and I think it's something that's been around everybody's. It's been in people's minds for a while. I want to once again acknowledge even early comments that Mark Nottingham made on this in an IAB plenary going way back to 2014 or so. The 2 points I wanted to make is that first of all, I do think there are times when we should be thinking about these aspects architecturally, and as they apply to our protocol suite. Perhaps one of the most egregious aspects of private networking is that it forces a form of concentration in that endpoints are all but prohibited from offering services without intermediaries. This is something that I raised early on, as far back as 1994, as a concern with private network addresses. So this is a problem that can recur. And I think Martin has written eloquently on the value and use and perhaps risks of intermediaries, and that comes into this discussion. The second point is that I wanted to agree with you about just how complex a problem this is. One can easily argue that mail services these days are considerably more reliable than they've ever been, because there is not only a concentration of service providers, but there's a concentration of expertise who then know how to scale these services, which is really good. The problem is when one of these providers fails, the damage is considerable. And we just saw a good example of that outside of the mail environment over the last few days with one particular offering where they took out, there was a risk that hit many thousands of businesses. So it's very, one of the things we should be thinking about in terms of resolving this, by the way, is can standards play a role? Can open standards or open guidance open up interfaces today that are in fact closed that might improve the environment in terms of the risks of resiliency that we face? All right, thanks very much.
Thanks,
So
Elliot.
just
And we have a
quickly want to say that we will close the queue very soon because we have now a huge number of people in the queue and only 7 minutes left. So if you want to say something, jump into the queue now and we'll be closed in 10 seconds.
Keith, you're next.
So purely questions. One thing, and maybe I missed it at the top, is where can folks get more involved in the discussion and participate in this discussion? Because I think this is one of my things too. I think a lot of people care about this one and would like to figure out how to give input. The other is, does the IAB have any good levers to pull to actually not just work against this, but just deal with it, whether it's work against it or say, this is looking like it's centralizing and maybe it's good and maybe it's bad, and we have to examine, and how might those levers affect IETF work? How might they affect other work. I'm just trying to get my head around how this is going to be useful discussion other than just shouting at clouds, which some of us love to do anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking for my decentralized button, but I can't find it right now. I think the only lever that we have is information and educating people. And with regards to where to discuss this, I think yesterday somebody suggested that we should organize a workshop. That's a possibility, but we've actually had workshops in this space, and some of that was in the slides. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but definitely architecture discuss is one place where we can discuss this.
It would be nice to have something more ongoing than a workshop. I mean, I think workshops are great and they always produce great output, but this seems like such a big topic that having something more long-lived that the IAB was running would be great.
Okay, we'll take that point under consideration. Thank you. Andrew.
Hi, yeah. Thank you for covering it again, sort of briefly but thoroughly, Jari. I just want to make 2 points. You touched on the fact there could be some benefits to users from centralization, and you mentioned some of them, like the sort of quick adoption of standards, etc. I think I would argue that that's unlikely to be true over the long term. So yes, there might be some short-term gains, but I think long-term, privacy, resilience, etc., is toast. So I don't see how it's in the long-term interest of users, even if it means that IPv6 gets adopted more quickly. Yeah, but all of my personal data is now available on the dark web. Feels like a bad trade-off over the long term. So I think long term, I question if there are any meaningful gains from it. And in terms of so what to do about it, I do think that there needs to be the ability to review and challenge sort of new protocols, etc., before they're allowed through as standards, to see if they do make the problem worse. And picking up on a point that Tommy made very well yesterday, and maybe intervene to improve them, to try and allow for those sort of negative side effects to be ameliorated in some way. But yeah, otherwise I think this is just a disaster for the end user and completely against RFC 8890. Thanks.
Thank you. Dominique?
Thanks. Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Jari, for highlighting the complexity and the different issues involved in this, because it is social, political, economic, it's market-based, it's technical, it's very complicated, and I really appreciate that. All I want to say is I just support Pete's idea about doing something that's IAB sponsored. Maybe using the workshop as a jumping off point, but I think it would be great to kind of have a discussion, ongoing discussion, at least for a little while, even though ones have already happened in the past. It's a perfect time right now. So looking to the IAB for some ideas. So thanks.
Okay, point taken. Thank you. David?
Hi, David Skenazy, IAB. So first off, I want to say that I agree that this is a complex topic that is important, like this, and I agree that too much centralization is bad, absolutely. That said, I'm very confused as to what the IAB, or at a larger scale, the IETF community can do here, because we are not the protocol police, we are not legislators. So what is the outcome here? If we write an RFC that says centralization is bad, that's not going to change the needle a bit. If we go and have a workshop and say, why is centralization bad? Because A, B, and C, I don't see that as moving the needle either. So while I think this is an important topic, I kind of see it as out of scope for the IETF in general. All we can do to make sure we don't encourage centralization is to make sure our protocols are open and extensible, so anyone can do anything they want with them, but that's been in our ethos since the beginning. So I'm not sure there's much more to be done from us here.
Yeah, your point is valid, I think, and I think that probably implies that we can't have like this, broad statements that, this bad, that good, but it's more pointed advice that here are techniques that can help in these situations. Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, so jump in. Just to reply, because a couple people mentioned what I had said at plenary with regards to this. I just want to clarify that I very much agree with what David said, that we cannot be a protocol police here, but that we should be just focusing on promoting protocols that allow distributed and non-centralized ways of doing things. And I think there are positive things we can do, but we should not be focusing at all on trying to prohibit this topic.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I share the concerns of a lot of people about centralization in many. Oh, by the way, Martin Duke, F5 and IESG. I do share the concerns a lot of people have about centralization in many aspects of the way the internet works. I do think that the work of creating interoperable standards is inherently decentralizing, because they allow you to switch out the vendors for things. So quite basically, I do. In my non-expert opinion, decentralization is largely a regulatory and legal problem. And I remain a little skeptical that the IETF has the levers. I mean, you mentioned one thing here, which is the client-side discovery. We do things like ADD, which I think are an effort to address that. I think we've been doing discovery techniques for a long time. But I have trouble seeing the levers that IETF has to move the ball forward on this. Thanks.
All right. And then Eker, the last word.
Yeah, I mean, David and Martin said a number of things that I would say. I guess, I think it's important to distinguish between things which are, inherently centralizing and in terms of technology, and things which are not. So, I mean, like, let's take the web, which is like inherently decentralized technology. Like, you can have as many websites you want. You can have, like link to other websites, etc. And yet, when you look at how the web in practice gets deployed, it's almost impractical to run any substantial size site using AWS or using a CDN or having it hosted for you. And so here we have a situation where there is a nominally decentralized system that is technically decentralized, and yet there are powerful economic and technical reasons why it gets shoved into a very small number of boxes. And so to the extent to which, you might ask if the IETF had designed the system differently, but like, what would you have done to make that inherently less centralized? And so if we want to do something meaningful here, then what we have to ask is, what are the technical functions that would reverse the incentives towards taking things which are nominally decentralized and actually centralizing them? And I think that's a really big open question. I think there's been a lot of work on it, frankly, a lot of it which I don't think works super well, and it isn't as persuasive as I hope. But I think those are the anchors that or the levers that we have to pull if there are any. And I think RFCs or blog posts about hazard realization is bad will not have much of an impact.
Thank you, Eker.
Okay.
I hand it over back to Shenbin and Miriam.
Okay, that's Mira, do you have any other word?
No, so unfortunately we have no time left for any other open mic, but feel free to send an email to IAB@iab.org if you want to tell us something or have a conversation with us. I think this conversation can go to the architecture discuss list, and we can keep discussing there. And with that, I think we're done. Sorry for going overtime for a few minutes. I hope you enjoyed it anyway.
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, to the attention to the IAB work. Okay, so that's all for the meeting. Thank you. See you next time. Okay. Bye.
Bye.